The marble floor was cold beneath his feet, not because of the stone, but because of the silence it carried. It was too clean, unnaturally so. He had grown up with dirt between his toes and ash in his lungs. Clean things made him nervous. They called him beautiful, a word he had never heard used for boys. But beauty, he would learn, was another kind of prison, lined with silk, perfumed with oil, and deathly quiet. When he asked, "What do you want me to do?" no one answered. They only looked. And the look lasted too long. He was 12. Greek by birth, sold by need. Before the palace, he had no real name. If one existed, it was forgotten like the stone walls of his crumbling home outside Thessaly. His father, once a stonemason, had lost his hands in a war that gave them nothing. His mother boiled roots and silence in a blackened pot. They used to speak of the gods, Olympus, honor, but hunger has no gods. So when the man in fine robes came with silver coins and soft words, they said yes, not because they wanted to, but because the boy had younger sisters and debts. He rode in the back of a cart for 3 days, wrapped in a torn blanket, past olive trees and dusty hills, toward something that smelled of smoke and incense. Athens was not what he had imagined. It was loud, gleaming, and indifferent. The palace was worse, too perfect, too symmetrical. The walls were polished like mirrors, but they reflected nothing. He didn't walk inside. He was pulled, not roughly, not kindly, just efficiently, like something acquired, not someone invited. No one spoke to him directly. Voices drifted around him like wind through columns. Servants in white robes bathed him in silence. They scrubbed his skin raw, cut his hair, dressed him in silk. Then they painted his eyes. When he looked down into the water, he saw something unrecognizable. A statue shaped like a boy. Alive, but not living. He wasn't alone in the concubine chamber. Others were there. Boys from far coasts, from distant dialects. But their eyes were the same, wide, trained, silent. They didn't talk about where they came from. They only taught him what he had to become. Walk slowly, eyes down, smile without teeth, never speak unless spoken to, never ask why. Every gesture held weight, how to hold a cup, how long to bow, when to laugh, and never too loud. Mistakes weren't punished. They were replaced. So he learned. Not to serve, but to survive. By day he trained. By night he vanished into the cushions of rooms not his own, into laughter that never reached his eyes. Every candle that flickered along the palace walls seemed to mock him, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. He lay still at night, hands pressed between his knees, willing himself not to cry. Tears would swell his eyes, and swollen eyes were not desirable. The palace had rules, but none were spoken. He learned them by watching who smiled and who didn't, who returned from the chambers and who disappeared. The first time he was summoned, the hall reeked of wine and pomegranates. Golden bowls spilled over with figs and salted fish. Laughter rang out, not joyous, but sharp, brittle, like glass ready to break. A eunuch in crimson robes took his hand, leading him down marble steps. He wasn't told where he was going. That, too, was part of the game. The chamber doors were heavy. He felt their weight before they opened. Inside, men reclined on couches, drunk on power and distraction. One waved lazily. The eunuch stepped aside. The boy moved forward. No hesitation. He had been trained for this. They asked him to pour wine, to dance, to kneel. He obeyed. They told him he was perfect. That night, one of the other boys was gone. No one said his name. No one asked. That was the rule. In silence, he listened. In silence, he watched. He memorized faces, tones, temperaments. Who liked what? Who grew cold when interrupted? Who stared too long? His silence became armor, then currency. He grew invisible, then unforgettable, then invisible again. Time melted, seasons passed without notice, boys came and went. He stayed. During a spring festival, he was painted gold from head to toe, made to walk barefoot across the marble courtyard while nobles dropped flower petals from balconies. They called it art. He called it obedience. Then he made a mistake. A senator's robe, a splash of wine. No one shouted, but the room froze. That night 2 servants brought him a bowl, not of food, but of ash. He was told nothing, just handed the bowl. He smeared the ash across his chest, a mark of shame. It stayed for a week. During that time, no one spoke to him, not even the eunuchs. When the ash finally washed away, fear remained. He was growing, taller, older, not a boy anymore, but not yet a man. And that, too, was dangerous. He began to notice patterns. Boys who grew too tall, boys whose voices deepened, boys who were once favorites, then quietly vanished. One was sent to the provinces, one stopped appearing, one jumped from the balcony. He started to change his posture, lowering his head more often, making his steps quieter. He softened his voice until it barely rose above breath. Anything to avoid attention, anything to delay being noticed again. But it didn't help. He was summoned once more. This time, no feasting, no laughter. The chamber was dark, the doors shut behind him. The candles were blown out. He never spoke of what happened. But afterward, he stopped speaking at all. For 3 days, his lips remained sealed. The eunuchs thought he was ill and summoned a healer. The healer didn't touch him. He only looked into the boy's eyes and said, "This is not illness. This is memory." One afternoon, alone in the servants' corner, the boy found a scroll. It was old, forgotten. A story written in fading ink, about a slave who escaped his master and wandered to Delphi. The slave never found freedom, but he carved his story into the temple walls. He died there. But the story lived. That night, the boy whispered, "If I disappear, let something stay." From then on, he began to record everything, not with voice, but with stolen scraps and ink, cloth, bits of parchment. He didn't know who would read them. He only knew they had to exist. His writings were spare, quiet, but sharp. Pain in silence is still pain. The robe does not erase the bruise. He said I was beautiful. I was 13. Then one day, a younger boy arrived, nervous, thin, his face still raw with the journey. The boy took his hand. He taught him how to walk, how to smile, how to serve without breaking, but not how to forget. "You won't be here forever," he whispered. "But while you are, watch everything." He had become more than what they trained him to be. He had become memory, and that was dangerous, because memory is what empires fear most. He no longer remembered his mother's voice, only the soft slap of sandals on polished stone, the whisper of silk robes brushing against his shoulder, the sound of laughter that never reached the heart. When the emperor's favorite general died, the boy was summoned to a private ceremony. No audience, no music, just a marble basin and an order: kneel, weep. Grief, even when forced, was still a performance. He leaned over the water but saw nothing. No boy, no reflection, no person. That night they dressed him in a new robe, midnight blue, lined with silver threads. "Tonight you are the sky," they said. "The gods will look down on you." But the room was dark. The gods were not watching, only men. A cluster of visiting nobles surrounded him, murmuring over oil lamps and platters of figs. He was told to recite a poem about longing. His voice shook. One word came out wrong. A slap followed, not from anger, but from routine. He did not cry. He was handed a perfumed cloth. "Don't stain the marble," someone said. "It's sacred." He bled into the cloth in silence, folded it, and handed it back. In that moment, something inside him tore, not with violence, but like parchment ripped slowly in half. Final, quiet, irreversible. He returned to his chamber, and again he did not speak for 3 days. They called the healer. "What hurts?" the man asked. The boy pointed to his chest, then looked away. His silence no longer intrigued the palace. It offended it. Silence here had to be aesthetic, not defiant. So they moved him to the lower quarters, where servants kept their heads down and no one met your eyes. He was no longer a favorite, he was furniture. Then one night, fire bloomed in the eastern wing. Servants shouted, buckets crashed, guards scattered, doors were left open. He didn't run. Not immediately. He walked first, past the corridor where he had once been made to laugh, past the painted walls that never bore his name. Then he ran, barefoot, down the hillside, into the olive trees. Thorns tore his robe, stones bloodied his feet, and with every step he whispered, "I am not yours." Years passed, or decades. He no longer counted. No scroll bore his name, no statue stood in his memory. The empire that once dressed him in silk and ash forgot him as easily as it had used him. But somewhere, far from Athens, on a quiet coastline where the sea met rock, he lived. He worked with his hands, built with wood and stone, not marble. He spoke little, to no one, not to the children who passed by his hut, not to the woman who once offered him a seat by her fire, not even to the olive trees that bent with the wind like they remembered him. He never wore silk again. But sometimes, on nights when the wind smelled faintly of smoke and figs, he would take a blank scroll. He would write a single line, then burn it. No one knew what the words said. Perhaps he was erasing the past, or perhaps he feared it would return. The empire built temples for its gods, monuments to thinkers, statues of warriors, but none for the boys who served in silence, none for those whose names were scrubbed clean, like dust from an emperor's sandal. Yet something endured, because someone remembered, not in stone, not in gold, but in silence, ink, and breath. Across language, across time, you heard his voice, not in marble, but in memory.